How's it going, guys? My name is Jimmy Champane, and now that the Child's Play WonderCon panel hype has died down, it's time to dig into everything that was revealed there. It all got kind of buried by Mark Hamill voicing Chucky, but then I did some digging around online, and I was able to find some pretty cool stuff. The first thing worth talking about is new footage from the movie was shown off. Unfortunately, it wasn't released to the public, but I'm sure we'll see it eventually because that's how it happened with Halloween. But anyway, Andy is coming home and pleading with his mom Karen to believe him that Chucky is alive and going after a character named Doreen. The reason he knows Chucky is alive is because he has his friend Omar's phone and he can track Chucky with it. But instead of believing him, Karen does not at all, and she accuses him of lying and gets upset at him for taking Omar's phone. Now, I went on IMDb and I figured out that Doreen is played by Chelsea Burke in the movie, and we actually see her in the trailer. She's trapped in a car and she's screaming in terror. There's a quick jump cut right after that, and it looks like the car she's in is T-boning another car. Now, my crazy theory around all of that is that since Chucky can connect to the internet and cars can connect to the internet now, he's gonna connect to this car and send it careening into another one. That's kind of something Chucky would do, right? If he could connect to the internet, I really think it is. But regardless, I think it's fair to say that Doreen is not gonna make it out of this movie alive. After the full scene, everyone at the panel got to see a new jump cutty trailer featuring a line from Detective Mike Norris, presumably talking to Andy, telling him if he knows anything, he better tell him right now. And then at the very end, we actually get to hear Mark Hamill speaking as Chucky. He says, "Good night, Andy," and he sounds just like the Joker mixed with Brad Dourif, which is exactly what I wanted to hear. When I heard that, I got chills, and I was just like, fuck yes. If you've been watching my videos, you know that when I heard Chucky was basically going to be a killer Alexa in this movie, I thought he'd have a synthetic child voice or sound something like a Google Home or a Siri, but I'm really glad that they're keeping his mean-spirited voice from the original Child's Play. I also like that there's a twist, so it's not just a clone of Brad Dourif, because you can't clone Brad Dourif's voice. You can't copy that. He's the best in the game. But Mark Hamill is a pretty good voice actor in his own right, and I'm just glad they're keeping that mean-spirited voice. That's just really what I needed. I know, very descriptive, Jimmy, but that's all I got for you on that. As for the rest of the panel, it was hosted by Clark Collis, who's a writer over at EW, and if you've been watching my channel since I was covering Halloween 2018, you've definitely heard his name a bunch, because he got the exclusive scoops on everything related to that movie. It was actually pretty awesome. Also in attendance were Aubrey Plaza, Gabriel Bateman, the director Lars Klevberg, and Tyler Burton Smith, who wrote the movie, on top of the two producers, who are notable because they also produced it. Personally, I loved hearing from Tyler Burton Smith, not only because he's the screenwriter of the movie, but also because he acknowledged how big of a deal it is for him to get to write the reboot of Child's Play, and then he went on to talk about how hard it was for him to walk the line of doing something new and fresh, and also paying respect to the old. The weirdest thing that was talked about at this panel, though, which I'm surprised was even brought up, is that from the very first meeting with Orion where the movie was greenlit, all the way to the first day of shooting was only a time frame of 6 months. Now, I try and sit in the middle of the fence and see both sides, you know, check out both sides of the coin, but that is very, very short. That's a quick turnaround, and it makes me pretty nervous. But that being said, it was nice to hear from Smith that in that short turnaround, he was able to create something new and fresh and emotional. And that's also exactly what Lars Klevberg said got him to sign on to the movie. He loved how original and fresh the script was. Now, to be fair, the producers, the writer, the director, those are the people who stand to see the most in terms of career gains and monetary gains from the movie doing well. So they're gonna say pretty much all good stuff about it because they want us to go see the movie. But it was reassuring to hear right after that from both Aubrey Plaza and Gabriel Bateman that the emotional range of the script is what got them to sign on. It was something new and exciting for them, even though it's a remake of a movie from 1988. I also think it's worth pointing out that this is a different sort of horror remake, mainly because of the abnormally strong cast. I mean, you've got names like Aubrey Plaza and Mark Hamill on there, and I'm really crossing my fingers that they're able to offset any weirdness that would come up from the quick turnaround of the script. And I do like that it's being called emotional and scary. Those are two words I like to hear. We've got an incredibly strong cast, so I'm gonna do my best to give the movie the benefit of the doubt, despite that really quick turnaround. It was also confirmed that the goal going into this movie wasn't to remake the Charles Lee Ray story, but to modernize Chucky and to do something fresh with him that makes him scary in the context of 2019. Another really great point that was brought up is that the new Chucky is scary to a lot of kids because they were raised by devices, like that iPad iPad 2 you forgot to sell, or the iPod Touch that's been sitting in your drawer. Those are basically virtual babysitters for a lot of kids, and because of that, they're able to have an emotional attachment to devices that we don't have as a little bit older people. And you know what? That does explain why the audience for this movie seems a little bit younger. The idea of technology turning on these kids that were raised by it must be pretty scary to them, and it kind of justifies it in a way that I didn't think of until hearing it at this panel. The most awkward part of the panel was definitely when Clark Collist asked what the doll is going to look like, because no one really had a good answer for it, and they all kind of sort of dodged the question because we haven't officially seen this doll yet. But they did bring up that the goal with it was to make sure it was as animatronic as possible. The producer who brought that up also talked about how at any given time there were 6 people on set ready to run this animatronic, and how they had to build a lot of the sets about 4 feet off the ground so these people could get in and out of it and run the doll right without getting caught on camera. I just love stuff like that. I think it's really interesting. And we've known for a while that the goal with this movie was to do everything as animatronic as possible and then to touch it up later with CGI. Now the downside of that is that a lot of pictures of the doll leaked and it didn't look very good, but we haven't seen the CGI touched up doll, and I'm not sure we will until the movie is out. And it's not to say that CGI can't be done right. I think the monsters in A Quiet Place are great examples of how you can make a scary CGI monster, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of horror fans, well, most horror fans prefer practical, and I'm definitely one of them. Even though Brian Tyree Henry wasn't at this panel, they talked about the new take on Detective Mike Norris, and they said that he has an emotional attachment to the story because they did change his whole motivation by taking out the Charles Lee Ray element. Based on leaks and everything we've heard, I'm thinking that he's going to be a single parent like Karen, and that he might even live in the same apartment building as her, and that one of his kids will end up being Andy's friend, which puts his kid in the mortal path of danger. And on top of that, I think he might also be a love interest for Karen, and that would make a really cool story since they're both struggling single parents that kind of are struggling to make ends meet. I just think that would be a great romantic arc they could explore. And speaking of struggling, Gabriel Bateman talked about how Chucky is basically Andy's first friend, and he's going to have a really strong emotional attachment to them. Now what I think is going to happen is once Chucky goes haywire and starts killing people, Andy's going to have to sort of team up with the kids in his building that all live around him, and he's going to have to make some human friends because they're the only ones who are going to believe him, and they're going to help him take down Chucky. You know, this movie does share 2 producers with it, which kind of took a vibe from Stranger Things, which took a vibe from The Goonies, and also every other Stephen King book. So it's all kind of coming full circle. That's everything from the WonderCon panel, but it was also revealed today that Child's Play will be at CinemaCon. There's a big ad on an elevator in Las Vegas where a bunch of people are trying to claw their way out of the elevator, and you can see Chucky at the very bottom. It's a pretty cool ad. Now the scary thing about CinemaCon is that it's giving me deja vu with Halloween. They showed off a ton of new footage for that movie at CinemaCon last year, and then we didn't get to see it for a very long time. But since this movie's coming out in June and Halloween came out in October, I'm hoping we'll see whatever they show off for Child's Play sooner rather than later. Coming off of that WonderCon panel and learning that Mark Hamill is voicing Chucky, I'm starting to believe that MGM and Orion are finally figuring out how to market their horror movies. They had a really admittedly rocky start that kind of soured me on the entire thing, but after this big announcement and all this cool stuff we heard over the weekend, I'm totally on board now. And anyways, this is all just practice for Neil Blomkamp's RoboCop, right? Anyway guys, that's it for your second Chuck date this week. Let me know what you thought of all of this new info down in the comments below, and if you're not subscribed already, I'd really appreciate it if you did. As always, my name is Jimmy Champane, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.